thank you to all the cops in our state who work tirelessly to keep us safe, but we need help. Since 2020, Milwaukee has become a killing field for everyone, including women and children and cops. The soft on crime policies of defunding the police and catch and release is a failed experiment put in place by misguided leadership, and those policies are now destroying our city and people are dying. This is an outrage that must end. Milwaukee has become a killing field where it's okay to prey on cops. We had 3 cops shot in the month of January, and that's because the criminals aren't afraid of getting locked up. We need a strong attorney general who will hold criminals accountable. We have seen homicides double from 2019 to 20, and in 2020 had record homicides again. And the record has just now been broken, or is on pace to be broken once again. It must end, and we will end it after we can elect Eric Toney as our next Attorney General in November and pass these reforms into law. Eric Toney is a visionary leader, and we endorse his plan to get tough on crime. The Safe Streets, Safe Homes plan will send a message to thugs that we're taking back our streets. We have seen the destruction of major cities around this country. The woke bail policies and police defunding from New York to Philadelphia to Milwaukee to Los Angeles. We have seen the destruction of our cities, our streets, our homes, and because of the left-wing policies of catch and release. The Safe Streets, Safe Home plan will make sure we have more cops on the street, and the Wisconsin Department of Justice will fill the unfilled positions to fight crime and clean up the mess at the crime lab. We need to give the State Department of Justice original jurisdiction over violent crime. Let's face it, we need to make sure that there is oversight to protect the public against the lack of prosecutions for our most violent criminals. The policies in place now of a low to no bail and plea deals to violent criminal elements are getting innocent citizens slaughtered in the streets. We need to implement mandatory minimums for violent criminals and violent crimes, and we need to allow judges to detain some criminals without bail like we do in the federal system. For the cops in our state, the next election presents us with life and death decisions for our communities. We need to support candidates like Eric Toney, who has the back of law enforcement, who supports more police, not less. We need to get back to the job of putting bad people in jail so that they are not allowed to terrorize the good citizens. We can make our state safer and elect Eric Toney for Attorney General so he can implement the Safer Streets, Safe Home plan on day one. We fear how far this criminal element will be allowed to go if the leadership does not change. Thank you, and I think Eric Toney.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you all for coming and having us here. Thank you, Eric. My name is Mark Setti. I'm the Vice President of the Wisconsin Fraternal Order of Police. The Fraternal Order of Police is a nationwide law enforcement organization representing more than 356,000 members nationwide. Here in Wisconsin, we have 24 active lodges representing more than 2,600 members here in Wisconsin. The Wisconsin Fraternal Order of Police is honored to stand here shoulder to shoulder with the brothers and sisters in blue from Milwaukee and around the state, and along with our next Attorney General, Eric Toney. And this is what we need. We need to come together as a unified force to address the issues plaguing our state. Because when our law enforcement professionals and policymakers are united in fighting crime, we can get our streets back from the thugs and criminals who terrorize our families and our communities. We need to unite behind Eric Toney and his Safe Streets, Safer Homes plan. I stand here today representing the members of the Wisconsin State Lodge of the Fraternal Order of Police, and we have unanimously endorsed Eric Toney for Attorney General. Why? Because Eric Toney is an experienced prosecutor with deep roots in law enforcement who puts violent felons in prison. He believes that violent crime deserves hard time, and that this criminal justice policy is what we need to make our streets safe and take our communities back. We are seeing a crime wave across this state and nation, the likes of which we have not seen before. We believe one of the most significant problems is the lack of accountability in our system. The social experiments of defunding the police, soft on crime policies, bail reform, giving criminals more rights than victims, and the revolving door of the same criminals arrested and then are directly back out on the streets before the ink is dry on the reports. These social experiments have proven to be a miserable failure, and it's time to put a stop to it. When there are no consequences for breaking the law, more people will break the law, and crime will continue to increase. Our communities are seeing the real-life consequences of what happens when our elected officials embrace these defund the police policies pro-criminal revolving door policies and make decisions that put the interest of violent offenders ahead of public safety. Eric Toney won't do that. Attorney General Josh Kaul has let down the brave men and women of law enforcement in Wisconsin and the communities they serve. He sat idly by as the police were defunded in Milwaukee and other cities across our state. He failed to clean up the crime lab, and he has left key positions within the Department of Justice unfilled. These are positions that could be helping our officers out in the streets, but they can't help when they're vacant. We are endorsing Eric Toney and his Safe Streets and Safe Homes plan because the time has come to get back to basics and get back to a tough-on-crime policy. This is a common-sense plan that will turn back the clock on the disastrous police defunding of 2020. Eric's plan will put more cops on the streets, fill the unfilled positions at the Department of Justice, to support our officers on the front lines and work towards implementing mandatory minimums for violent criminals and allow judges to detain some criminals without bail like they do in the federal system, which will keep them off the streets so they can't continue to victimize our citizens and our communities. We can make our state safer by voting for Eric Toney for Attorney General, and we can implement the Safer Streets, Safer Homes plan on day one in January of 2023. We need Eric Toney as our Attorney General here in Wisconsin. Law enforcement and the hardworking, law-abiding citizens of Wisconsin cannot afford 4 more years of Josh Kaul. Thank you for your time. Eric?
Thank you. Well, I can't tell you what an honor it is to be here with the Milwaukee Police Association and the Wisconsin Fraternal Order of Police to have their endorsement and support to be our next Attorney General. And I got into this race for a simple reason. We need an Attorney General that stands with our law enforcement and will stand with all of us here in Wisconsin by enforcing the rule of law and locking up dangerous criminals. And that's what my record is as a district attorney in Fond du Lac County. And these issues are personal to me, not just being a district attorney, but being the son of a cop, having been in that blue line family my entire life and seeing the sacrifices that our men and women in blue make day in and day out that I saw my dad make as I grew up. And we've seen officers in the city of Fond du Lac make the ultimate sacrifice. And we need an Attorney General that is going to stand with our law enforcement, not just when it's politically popular and not taking cheap political attacks at our law enforcement. We're here in front of the crime lab today for a really specific reason. Over Easter weekend, our Attorney General Josh Kaul tried to bury his failure at the crime lab by releasing the most recent crime lab report. And the reason he tried to bury it is because that was effectively his #1 campaign promise, was the crime lab. And here are the facts. Compared to Brad Schimmel, he's testing less items, he's taking in less items to test, and he's taking longer to test those items with the same or more resources than Attorney General Schimmel had, and he has failed in his management of the crime lab. But on top of that, he's failed in the management of so many key areas of public safety at our Department of Justice. There's a reason the Attorney General is called the top cop, because they're in charge of the crime lab. The Attorney General is in charge of our DCI agents. The Attorney General is in charge of prosecutors. The Attorney General is in charge of training and standards at our law enforcement and crime victim services. And he's mismanaged virtually every one of those areas. DCI should be fully staffed with 113 DCI agents, but Josh Kaul has left it at 88. That number was confirmed by Tina Virgil, the director of DCI, at the Badger State Sheriff's Conference this week and at their most recent conference about 3 months ago, where they've made no progress during that time. We know that recruitment and retention is difficult for law enforcement across this state, and we need DCI to be fully staffed to assist our law enforcement on complex investigations. On top of that, Josh Kaul has left prosecutor positions vacant at our Department of Justice. And I have conversations with DAs across Wisconsin that have been unable to get help from our Department of Justice because they don't have enough resources to do it, because Josh Kaul has effectively defunded police and prosecutors from our Department of Justice. And as Attorney General, I will ensure those positions are filled to help keep our communities safe across Wisconsin, because these are some of the best and brightest law enforcement and prosecutors we have across Wisconsin, and the positions need to be filled, and they need to be filled now. And I called on Josh Kaul to do this back in October of last year. to fill these vacant positions, and he appears to have taken virtually no steps to do that, and we can't afford another 4 years of that inexperience and failure as we're seeing historic violence here in the city of Milwaukee, record-breaking drug deaths across our state. We need an attorney general that is going to be serious about standing with our cops and helping keep our community safe. That's why last October I proposed giving our attorney general original criminal jurisdiction over Milwaukee County to take on that violent crime that they're unable or unwilling to prosecute. And I did that for a simple reason. As a DA in Fond du Lac County, we see violence from Milwaukee bleed across Wisconsin. If you talk to my DA colleagues across the state, you talk to our sheriffs and law enforcement, they will tell you the exact same thing. So if we can protect Milwaukee, we can protect all of Wisconsin, because we must put an end to this violence. It broke my heart last year. I read a story from the Los Angeles Times where they were talking to a family here in Milwaukee that said, I won't let my kids go to a playground because I'm afraid of stray bullets. No family should have to live that way. And to have leaders that are attempting to balance their budget at the expense of public safety is unconscionable. The most recent Milwaukee police budget from our outgoing mayor of Milwaukee proposed 25 less police officers here in the city of Milwaukee. We need leaders that are going to be serious to address violent crime. Toney Evers right now could be releasing some of that pandemic money to add more cops on the street, to give them more resources, and he should have done that months and months and months ago. But he sat on his hands as unprecedented violence has swept across our state. At one point, he was even asked if he had met with, I think, a victim of a homicide, and he said he was, I think, pretty busy or something to that effect, paraphrasing what he said. If our governor is too busy to meet with the victims of homicide, he has his priorities wrong. You know, I will be in a homicide trial next week, and I have sat across from too many families that have lost their children to drug deaths across Wisconsin, and we need leaders that will be serious about addressing these problems. Now, I've also proposed that we need to reform our criminal justice system in different ways to improve it. And one of those ways is mandatory minimums for violent crime to make sure dangerous criminals are getting locked up to keep our community safe. But we also need to improve our cash bail system here in Wisconsin, because right now, cash bail is only allowed to ensure the defendant will appear in court. And that's why we see judges often letting defendants out on low bail, because these judges take the approach that they can't set cash at a higher number. And so that's why I propose that we need to define in our statutes what it means to be unlikely to appear in court, to give judges specific criteria that they shall and must consider when setting bail, so that we can see high bail to protect our communities, and also to improve the law that we have to hold a defendant without bail. Right now, that law is unworkable, where district attorneys across Wisconsin are unable to use it because it effectively puts that case on a speedy trial track with having hearings. And we need to improve that law by making the hearing more similar to a preliminary hearing, and also taking it off of the speedy trial track while still giving defendants routine status hearings to make sure that their cases are coming back before judges, and to ensure that we can detain these defendants without bail. As we see GoFundMe and other efforts to fund bail for defendants, we need to make sure that they are able to be held without bail, and that district attorneys across Wisconsin have the ability to do that, because prosecutors across this state are overworked, they're underpaid, and they're under-resourced to the point where a starting assistant district attorney makes about $52,000 a year. And we have DAs across the state that can't fill the vacant positions that they have right now because people can make more money in the private sector. And we see other people, including our attorney general, attacking frontline prosecutors for the hard work that they're trying to do in our courtrooms. And we need to be able to recruit and retain amazing prosecutors. And Toney Evers recently proposed some pandemic prosecutor positions, and it was like giving a child a toy on Christmas without batteries, because the pay is so low and we don't have the ability to boost that pay, that we have been unable to fill those positions. And we need help from the governor's office to address these issues so that we can recruit and retain prosecutors, because we have young prosecutors stepping into the courtroom having to handle cases that they don't have the experience to handle. And we need to give them the resources to be successful to help protect our communities, because we're taking those difficult cases that law enforcement are sending to DA's offices across the state, and they need help. And we need an attorney general that will stand with our prosecutors, that will stand with our cops, and we need an attorney general that can fix the mess at our crime lab. Because the reality is this: the crime lab, they have excellent, amazing employees. I've worked with so many of them in just about every field that they testify in, and they need to be supported. But the reality is, they've almost certainly been testifying in court less in 2021 because we've seen places like Milwaukee County that are still last year not fully operational for criminal jury trials. And in 2020, the Wisconsin Supreme Court didn't allow jury trials for a period of time, and some counties took longer to become operational as they put their plans in place. And so they should have been testing more, but the Attorney General had a lot of those employees working from home from time to time, and if you're working from home, it becomes very difficult to conduct that forensic testing at our crime lab. We need an experienced attorney general that has management experience, that has used those resources, because the reality is this: I'm the only candidate in this race that's actually personally prosecuted cases here in Wisconsin and used the resources of the crime lab in those prosecutions. And there's a difference between prosecuting at the federal level and prosecuting at the state level, where DA's offices file thousands and thousands of cases, and you'll see prosecutors and DAs across the state that will have hundreds and hundreds of open cases at any one time. And we need experience back to our Department of Justice, because we don't have time for on-the-job training as we see historic violence across Wisconsin. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Andrew, and for Eric, in terms of reckless driving, which plays into all of this sometimes, is the city's plan and is the department's plan right now working, and what would you like to see in terms of any state involvement to help assist with that?
I think the city's started their plan with the mayor's plan on reckless driving. I think it was a good step forward to use and be able to tow the vehicles of these people that are creating reckless driving. That automatic response of holding somebody accountable is what we need from the lowest level of criminality to the highest level of criminality. We have to have that automatic response where they know that they're going to be held accountable at some level.
And
Does the state have a role in this?
so one of the things that's so important as we see this across our state, vehicle chases, if you talk to the state patrol, not just here in Milwaukee, but they're exploding might be too strong of a word, but we're seeing surges in those across our state because law enforcement here in Milwaukee is so under-resourced and understaffed that it becomes hard to prioritize what can they deal with and what calls can they respond to. And so people are getting away with these vehicle chases, and when that happens here in Milwaukee, then we're seeing that surge in other parts of our state, and we need to make sure that Milwaukee has the resources that they need to hold these individuals accountable so that we can protect the rest of Wisconsin. And when the Department of Justice isn't fully staffed with DCI agents or prosecutors, it makes it more difficult because sometimes those agents and prosecutors are giving guidance and advice to prosecutors across Wisconsin and to our law enforcement. And so when DCI and DOJ are not fully staffed, it makes it more difficult for law enforcement across Wisconsin.
I have a few questions about the draft abortion ruling. Do you support prosecuting doctors who perform abortions if Roe is overturned?
So what I've said and what we expect from our Attorney General is that the Attorney General will enforce the rule of law. And I think as I travel the state, everybody agrees with that. We want an Attorney General that will not inject their political beliefs, that they will enforce the rule of law. And so there are people right now that tell me as a district attorney that they want me to prosecute people that are involved in having abortions. The law doesn't allow for it, and I will not do it. I am proudly pro-life, and if Roe versus Wade is overturned, as a DA or as an Attorney General, I will enforce and defend the laws that the legislature has passed and are signed into law, because that is the responsibility of our Attorney General. And it's a sad reality that we saw this week. Our Attorney General said that he will not enforce the laws on the books here in Wisconsin if allowed, that he's going to pick and choose and play politics over the rule of law. That's not how our legal system works. That's not how we do things in America, and he should be ashamed.
What would be your approach different from Josh Call, as he came out and said no state resources would be used under his watch?
We're going to enforce the rule of law. If that means prosecutors as Attorney General, if they need guidance or support, we're going to provide that because the Attorney General is statutorily obligated to give that guidance to law enforcement and to prosecutors. So now we have an Attorney General that has effectively said he's going to abdicate his responsibility because he doesn't like the law. That makes him unfit to hold that office.
And if you were DA, sitting DA, since DAs do have primary enforcement of this ban, what would you do? And would you enforce all cases of abortion? What about cases where embryos are destroyed during the IVF process?
So as I've said, we will enforce the law as passed by our legislature and signed into law. And so I'm not going to get into hypotheticals about what the law may or may not be. We will enforce the law as passed by our legislature and signed into the law because that's what we do as district attorneys, and that's what we expect our Attorney General to do.
Eric, how big of a deal do you think this issue will be now in the race? Obviously, you were all here to talk about crime. That's a huge issue that the Attorney General candidates are facing. Where's abortion going to play into this now with the court?
Well, I think, number one, the court hasn't ruled. And that's where we have to, I think, take a step back and say, we don't know what the court ultimately is going to do. They very well this may be a harbinger of what may come, but let's see what happens before we go down those hypotheticals. I've made my position very clear that I will enforce the rule of law as a district attorney and as an Attorney General, and that's what we expect. We don't need politicians running our Department of Justice and allocating resources or not for political reasons. We need somebody that's going to put the safety and security of Wisconsinites first and enforce the rule of law, that if we don't like the law, then we work with our legislature to try and change the law, not injecting our partisan political beliefs as our top cop.
DA Chisholm said that the DA's office in Milwaukee is currently overwhelmed, a little bit overwhelmed with all the current cases here, the violent crime, and that it maybe wouldn't be his top priority to prosecuting abortion doctors. What would you do if you were AG and even as DA in Fond du Lac?
Well, so I've made my position really clear that I will enforce the law as passed by the legislature and signed into law. That's what we expect from our Attorney General. That's what we expect from our district attorneys. And I've made it clear that DAs across Wisconsin need more resources and they need more support so we can help keep our communities safe.
Mark or Andrew, just real quick, is there any risk in endorsing in primaries, or do you feel like this is necessary to come out and publicly do as we see all these races start to play out?
I mean, for us, I think there's always risk in endorsements. I mean, but we're in such drastic, I think, where we need a change of our Attorney General, someone who can support the police, someone who will have our back so we can get back to the business of doing police work. We need someone that's gonna come in and say, look, you cops are arresting the police. You guys are doing a good job. You're arresting them, and now they're being let go, and now they're reoffending. You're rearresting them. You're rearresting them. We need a leader in place that's going to stop that recycle. 90% of the crimes are committed by 5% of the criminals. We got to make a better focus, and we need oversight to get those 5% over, and that's why we chose and we endorsed Eric Toney.
I'll address that very briefly. The same thing. Of course, there's risk in endorsing somebody early before our primary, but our endorsement of Eric Toney is based on our entire membership statewide. It wasn't one or two people that made this decision. This went out to our entire membership throughout the state, and there was a very strong push to endorse Eric throughout the state, through all of our members, through all of our 2,600 members statewide. So that's where that came from. Is it risky? Of course it can be. But I echo Andrew's comments that we need somebody that is going to be strong and tough on crime. Eric has a very deep background in law enforcement. As he said while he was speaking, his father was a police officer. He saw the sacrifices and the things that police officers go through on a day-to-day basis. He's grown up with it. He knows it. And his record in Fond du Lac County as a district attorney shows that he's strong on crime as well. So that's the reason that we went with the endorsement. And it certainly can be risky, we certainly don't think that it will be in this case because Eric is the guy for the job.